My name is Anita F. Hill.
I am here today not because I want to be. I am terrified. But the details about that night that bring me here today are the ones I will never forget.
What happened next and telling the world about it are the two most difficult experiences of my life.
About 2 days ago, I was walking up the steps of the Capitol when Representative Yoho suddenly turned a corner and accosted me on the steps right here in front of our nation's Capitol. And in front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, "a fucking bitch."
Brett and Mark came into the bedroom and locked the door behind them. I was pushed onto the bed, and Brett got on top of me. He began running his hands over my body and grinding into me.
I thought that by saying no and explaining my reasons, my employer would abandon his social suggestions.
For a very long time, I was too afraid and ashamed to tell anyone these details. I convinced myself that because Brett did not rape me, I should just move on and just pretend that it didn't happen.
It's just another day, right?
It's just another day, right? Anita Hill, Christine Blasey Ford, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Just a small number of the brave women who have come forward telling their stories about sexual harassment in and around politics. But let's look at the outcomes of these stories. Clarence Thomas made it onto the Supreme Court, as did Brett Kavanaugh. Representative Ted Yoho is still thriving down in Florida. And that's the case for many of these stories. Women who go into politics have to deal with this in a very public way all the time. Despite this, there are many women out there who are fighting for our rights and breaking glass ceilings every day. I sat down with the representative of New Mexico's 28th District, Melanie Stansberry, to discuss what it is like to be a woman in politics. Here's what she had to say.
Well, I think there's a lot of areas where women are still moving into leadership roles, and politics is one of them. I think it's always helpful. I always try to keep things in perspective of like the historical context. For the vast majority of women, they were not able to work in professional settings. So what I see a lot for my generation is that we are now kind of coming of age and moving into leadership positions ourselves. And, I think in some settings, it's just not the custom. And so people sometimes are surprised. The day I went to go get sworn in as a state legislator, I was looking for where to go. And I got asked if I was someone's secretary. And, it's not that the person was trying to diminish me in any way. He was actually trying to help me. But it just wasn't part of his everyday consciousness to think that maybe I'm a legislator.
I asked her about her journey into politics, and she told me about the organization that helped her start it all.
Part of how I got assistance and inspiration to run for office is I signed up to do a program called the Emerge program, which is a women's leadership program that helps women learn about the nuts and bolts of how to campaign, and helps provide leadership training and helps you learn how to tell your story. I think a lot of organizations out there right now that are helping women make that jump. And so I think one of the benefits of all that is that it's creating these networks of sisterhood to help us succeed. I think that there are still so many barriers and so many levels for women to succeed in politics that it takes a lot to get there. And so I think that when you get there, to the place you've arrived at your goal, your career goal, or your political goal, or whatever it is, you're really dedicated and invested into the work itself. And I think that is a benefit because, I think that oftentimes women in those roles take on really meaningful work for the community, and that in and of itself, that's what keeps you going because it makes you feel like you're doing something that matters.
We ended our conversation talking about what she believes her generation, and all those to follow, still need to work on and should be focusing on.
But there's still a lot of work to be done, and I think, the work, especially right now, that's being done in our society around racial justice and decolonization and addressing those kind of intersectionalities with other parts of people's identities is the really critical work that we're kind of like right in the middle, in the crucible of right now. Creating opportunities, especially for women of color and Indigenous women and Black women, to break through the glass ceilings that are even thicker for them is, I think, the really important work right now. I was interviewed by a reporter last week about women in politics, and he said, well, why do you think it's important? It was a man interviewing me. Why do you think it's important for women to be in politics? And I said, because we're 50% of the population. And so what I'm looking forward to is a time in which nobody even asks that question, right? Because democracy is about everybody participating in the process. So it shouldn't be a novel that 50% of the population want representation in our government, right?
It was such an honor to be able to talk with Miss Stansberry about feminism, the women's movement, and women in politics. Despite the great difficulties women have to face, Miss Stansberry is fighting every day for New Mexicans like you and me. Her work is helping women everywhere fight for equality, and that makes life better for all.